Thank you very much for watching this video where I will explain very briefly the article that my colleague Dr. Sellier and myself have written entitled Artificial Intelligence and the Equilibrium of Failure for Replaying Japan. I'm Dr. Goudet from the University of Rouen, and I will walk you through this process very quickly. We envisioned AI as both coded in a machine and AI as an agent within the video games. AI is a set of characters, of behaviors, of Kiaras as well, and we wanted to really try and differentiate from other views of AIs as only opponents. The failure we are going to envision here are twofold. First, they can be omissions, which refer to something that was expected and yet did not happen. These omissions may be voluntary or involuntary. We also see failure as the opposite of success, which could threaten the whole, the wholeness of something, of an agent, wherever it is, and closer to, of course, being an AI in itself. We used discourse analysis and tried and look at several video games in order to see if these failures would set them apart from humans, and if AIs failing are actually closer, further from humans, or in another dimension altogether. The equilibrium between failure and success is actually a place, an interface for us where humans and AIs get to meet. The corpus we used is going to be very briefly described as a group of things from fighting games to action and role-playing games to other genres of games, like a web browser, games like QWOP, or beat them all, like Pool State. The first element that we really wanted to explore was the failure of programs as a site for post-human encounters, that is, the meeting of both humans and AIs. First, we looked at bugs, at glitches, at elements that would trigger a failure for the whole thing. We decentralized the reading of video games. That is, we did not see actors as only humans, or rather humans as the only actors, but also AIs and these failures as actors in themselves. There are several games that twist on the expected, like a very famous bug in Final Fantasy IV, and here the view of Street Fighter makes it entirely unplayable as it is, or rather very addictive and very broken, as this cartridge was a hack that was developed in Taiwan and that made the game much faster than its official counterpart, while allowing also to use other characters while pressing C during a fight, which is completely impossible during the actual game of Street Fighter. These failures constitute negotiations with non-human agents on the part of the human experiencing these games. We also have the specter of AIs outperforming humans as being very prevalent here. There are several AIs that were developed in order to help gamers and speedrunners or star players outsmart some games. Obviously, these also helped to lower the time needed to complete a game, as you can see dramatically for Minecraft on the slide I just showed. AIs also play and evolve through trial and error, through the reuse of failure as a tool to understand what's not to be done. But also AIs can go towards unexpected directions. For instance, not losing a game for play fun, not losing a game of Tetris means to pause right before losing, because indeed the game is going to go on as expected. However, obviously, pausing means not playing as well as not losing, which means that the AI's way of thinking is not exactly that of humans. We also saw failures of AI characters as moments where they were striving towards humanization and maybe failing ultimately. Failure is a proof of their humanness or as a proof of what they were devised to do, and that's what we can see in the character of Robochi in Guilty Gear. Robochi is a parody, really. It is the twisted version of a character whose honor is very important, but he uses improper words and corrupted versions of the expected. He's sleazy, he's womanizing, he's not doing the expected, and ultimately he redeems himself. Through the fact that he understands he's part of society. As his corruption evolves, he actually emancipates from all the expectations, all the things that we wanted from him. Talk normally and not talk using outdated pronouns, for instance, which will be very apparent in the article itself. Failures are also elements where characters may be unhumanized and rendered unhuman as a way to show that they actually succeeded. As you can see here, I took the example of Jack from Tekken, who used to be a grunt, really, one of the many copies of a robot, but he emancipated through his love for biological, he's a name for humans, and actually he gets very excited at the end of Tekken 7 because through his own ending, we learned that he got a job as a chief humanoid weapon and an allowance of $25, which is enough for him to having, explode in glee, basically, because he falls down a building. It's a way to show how non-human he is through the fact that he's still a war machine, but acts on a grid that is completely different from ours. We can also see that there are strategies to appear as human, which may or may not work. In the Xenoblade, franchise, Cosmos is a vessel to resurrect a human being, but this vessel, Cosmos, evolves. It is endowed with a simulated personality OS, but throughout the games and from the third game on, we see that she cares more and more for her creator and more for the figure of the maiden, which was the person she was trying to resurrect, basically. She was embodied to resurrect. Her care and her feeling actually shows in the shift in her eye color. Whenever she has blue eyes, she becomes closer, tuned to humans, basically. These physical traits materialize the glitch that she undergoes. We also have the same thing with some AIs pantomiming to be humans, like Aiba in the eyeball in AI's Somnium Files, who mimics smelling something because she wants to appear human, whereas she obviously isn't. These create tensions. These strategies to appear human create tensions within the character itself, threatening the whole. Our last point suggests that maybe failing to be human is a quest for one's identity, and that we may envision this through the prism of being queer, of queering AI's identities. Humanizing points of all these characters is a big problem. We see that they have personalities, that some of the elements that we saw, that some of the characters had personalities who acted as moral agents. So that threatens Heidegger's way of looking at humans as the only moral agents. Forging their identity goes through looking a lot like very sexualized humans. That's what you can see on the slide, with characters that look either very feminine, even on a battlefield, or overly powerful, as Jack from Tekken 6 here. actually getting to forge one's identity goes towards desexualizing, going away from the usual, from the expected, because the expected is very human, and going towards the queer AI-ness, the queer androidness. That's where everything intersects with political movements. We have to move away from a preconceived anthropocentric gaze in order to look at these AIs the way they are. And to emancipate from the two big points I wrote about femininity equals care and sexualization, and masculinity as wisdom or as a way to go towards power. That's the reason why some AIs have strange bodies. Strange bodies that fumble, strange bodies that fail. That something that we saw that was already seen by queer studies studying video games, like Phillips's work on ragdolling. Strange bodies are a way to signal queer identities wherever that queer is, wherever that abnormality is. That's also what we have in Pulse State, which is a game that is still ongoing development from Nito Tsuji, who created a character, Hikikomori, like himself, who has a robotic counterpart. As you can see here on the video, the human avatar gets unmotivated and has to be either struck or given presents in order to feel better again. The failure of his body, the failure of his mind are coded within the animations. And as you can see, his body is also fallible and he's also feeble in itself in the way it moves. The ineptitudes are led by the agent. The ineptitudes are either voluntary or involuntary, which is also in itself fairly interesting. We also looked at elements threatening humanness through their animality, because there are some elements that get converted. There are some AIs that are still agents, but are turned into composite figures, like Eyeball, which is either a human when she is personalized, or in her physical form, an eyeball that is put in the detective's eye socket in AI The Somnium Files, or, as you can see, embodied as a little hamster-like figure that is very unsettling to look at. There's also the case of Porygon Z, which is the final form of a Pokemon called Porygon. But the problem with it is the fact that it is highly mechanical, as you can see. I put two pictures of Porygon 2 and Porygon Z, and strangeness, errors, is ineptitude to communicate with other Pokemons is coded within all the descriptions of this character throughout its appearances in the Pokemon games. We do not know if it's an evolution, and its existence in itself is a mistake created by a computer virus, maybe, the W's disk, which we can see as a way to embody a bad virus, or maybe a good virus, something that has its evolution get out of hands entirely. To conclude, we saw also machines as moral agents, and this is going to allow me to slide towards my conclusion. Machines are seen as moral agents, as humanity in itself is amoral, and that's what we have when looking at Nier Automata, where the war waged between androids and machines is pointless, since humanity does not exist anymore and androids have been created by humans. In the fight I took a screenshot of, 2B has to fight against the red girls. Her only answer in order to win the fight is to not fight, because the red girls, are going to self-destruct, ultimately. This way of looking at things, away from humanity, away from humans, is a way to decentralize our gaze, which was the male gaze before, is now the anthropocentric gaze, and these two need to take a step back in order to look at the whole picture. That is the picture of failures and negotiation of the space between humanity and androidness, of AI-ness, I guess, which puts me towards my actual conclusion. There was a back and forth in all these characters between what is human, what is non-human, and things that set apart humans' consciousnesses away from humans, because they have their own agenda, because they are moral agents in themselves. All the AIs we saw so far are figures of protection, of emancipation, of evolution or devolution in itself. And they strive in order to preserve their identity, their equilibrium, as well as we strive to preserve our equilibrium and not fail, not be buggy, not act in ways that are game-breaking in themselves. The case of Yoshiko-san, which is a Mama-san, is also a way to show that even out of video games, there are figures like her, who is an AI she's a chatbot that was developed using a real Mama-san and recording her for 50 hours in order to listen to her. She's a ventriloquist artificial intelligence, and here you can see a picture of her embodiment, which is in itself very reminiscent of a ventriloquist's doll. And she speaks only moving, the lower part of her mouth, just like a ventriloquist's doll would do. We used a few references in order to complete this article. This is but a small selection of all of these. And now there is only one thing for me left to do, which is to thank you very much for listening. Merci beaucoup. Arigatou gozaimasu. And I will see you very soon with my colleague during the roundtable.